Women Making Waves.
We were talking recently about New Year resolutions, but small changes, I think are the best way to go. If you want to change something, rather than making big radical changes that are actually quite hard to sustain, maybe making a small number of tiny changes actually amounts to something. What do you think? Discuss, Susie.
Yeah, discuss. Thank you. I know you, and then you're going to ask me what small changes. But you're right.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I know you are, but I might ask you instead in a minute. I think it's really interesting, isn't it? You were always, when you were at school, you had a list of things that you had to do before you do an exam, and you had to make sure that you had revised this piece of text and that piece of text, and they were big challenges, weren't they? And I suppose if you put them into bite-sized pieces, maybe if I'd done my homework, Linda, I might have done nano changes. I'm not sure, but I think
if you've done any of it,
yeah, exactly, about any of my homework. I mean, yeah, nano changes for me are, I suppose, in the morning, what makes me feel better is making my bed in the morning and making sure the bed's tidy, and that for me is like a change that helps me get through the day. I don't know, but it's almost like
that's
a clear...
good thing. Yeah, stuff like that, habits like that. Now, I was reading about this recently, and they say even if you just make your bed first thing in the morning, you can at least in your head think, right, I've done one thing. That's me started. Tick. That's something done. Move on to the next thing and see what else we can do.
Exactly.
So that's a nano tick in your box, really. A little thing that you've done. It moves you forward. It moves you forward to the next thing that you can tick. Filling the dishwasher with your breakfast dishes. Or dish, in my case.
I don't like emptying the dishwasher. I have to say, I love loading it, but I do not like emptying my dishwasher. That sounds terrible. I think,
it's
my God,
just all
it's
stuff
clean.
that should be done by someone else, in my opinion. Need a maid.
I like looking back. It sounds really pathetic, but I do like coming out of, I've made my bed, and I then turn around and think, bed's made, sorted. You're absolutely right. You then go on and find something else.
That's me for the day.
Yeah, and me for the day. Done it. That's it. That's my hard work sorted.
I'll sit down now. That's it.
We go on to our guests because we have two interesting guests, don't we? Jules Walters, who is a life coach, and she advocates that you are CEO of your own health. I really like that. I like
that as well, actually. It does kind of remind you that it's not your doctor who's in charge of your health. It's you. You're the one who's living it. And as far as they're concerned, they might advise you, but it's you that's got to do it.
Well, it'll be very interesting talking to her. She is podcaster, health coach, and an award-winning author as well. And she helps leaders become CEO of their health. Really interesting. And then we've had Tamara, haven't we? What's going on with
Dr.
Tamara?
Tamara Polajnar. She's a CEO of HerEthical AI, and she talks about her time in Cambridge University. She was here for many years. She talks about machine learning. She's been working with the police. HerEthical AI are interested in helping them sort out their data in the police. And one of the projects that they're working on is how to detect victim blaming at the moment. Very, very interesting lady.
You're listening to Women Making Waves radio show and podcast, brought to you by Susie Thorpe and Linda Ness. This show is all about women doing extraordinary things.
We are joined today by Dr. Tamara Polajnar, who is co-founder and CEO of HerEthical AI, which provides expert guidance and practical machine learning solutions for police forces and third sector organisations. Tamara has over 20 years' experience in working in the AI field. Thank you for joining us today, Tamara. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I thought let's go back, because I was looking at your LinkedIn, and let's go back to when you did your first degree at university. That was in British Columbia in Canada. That's where you did a bachelor's degree in computer science. Why did you end up choosing computing for a start?
I guess it wasn't that much of a choice. Both my parents were computer scientists. And when I went in and I said, I'm going to be an artist and I'm going to paint for a living, and they were like, would you not want to do something that will kind of give you a more secure future? And I was like, I guess if I have to. And they were like, great, you just do computer science. So I did.
So you're actually an artist then. Underneath it all, you're an artist, are you?
Yeah, frustrated artist somewhere underneath. Yeah, very far away now. Yeah.
At least it's something that you can always keep up, as your parents would say. You can do that in your spare time, Tamara.
Yeah. There's lots of spare time as you grow up, as they well knew too. So.
Yeah, exactly. Where's that coming from? So, were you brought up in Canada?
No, I was born in Belgrade in what was then Yugoslavia. And in 1993, when a lot of people left due to Yugoslavia breaking up quite dramatically, we ended up in Canada. And we ended up in East Coast Canada initially. But both my parents, my dad was an academic, and mom later became an academic because a new university opened up in Northern British Columbia, University of Northern British Columbia. In Prince George, and my dad both my parents got a position teaching there in computer science. This is going to sound like awful nepotism because you said I finished my degree there too. But yeah, they weren't allowed to mark my assignments or my tests. They were just allowed to lecture me. So that was an interesting experience. We moved to Northern British Columbia, which was very much a different place than Belgrade.
Yeah, I can imagine at the time it would have been, yeah.
Could I ask you, Tamara, the surroundings of Canada, was it a very sort of computer science-orientated place where you lived? Was it a very natural thing to do in that area?
In Prince George. Prince George is a logging town, so most of the industry there, before the university opened, was growing and cutting trees, and that sort of industry was more like an industrial town, very remote, about 80,000 people, about 500 miles north of Vancouver, and so many miles up to Alaska again. So yeah, a very interesting place. The university was opened to serve an area that didn't have accessible education, that a lot of people who were in my year and the years before me were sort of older students who didn't have a chance to go to university. It was a very nice place to go to undergrad because we had very small classes. I think one of my friends went through physics, and for the last 2 years he had one-to-one tuition. He was the only graduate in physics.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. And computer science, maybe we had about 25 people per year. So we had actually excellent education in this very kind of remote place.
Yeah, so you almost had lecturers and teachers.
Her parents, Susie.
Yes, her parents, that as well. But it's interesting how you at the new university and that area, and you're pulling in some interesting skill-based teachers coming in to teach you.
Yeah, no, it was some really great people from all around the world coming to teach, because actually there's a lot of academics who would love a permanent position anywhere. And it's a great opportunity to start their own program. So they spent a lot of work designing the program and making sure it's really good. All the programs there. It's a great little university. Yeah,
that's amazing.
And the Queen came to open it as well. In 94.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she came and she opened the university in 1994. It was very exciting. Yeah.
Oh, that would be exciting. Yeah.
Wow.
And then you went on to study at Edinburgh and Glasgow universities. How did you end up in Scotland? Was this an effort to get away from having your parents as your lecturers?
Yeah. I was living at home through my undergrad, so spending a year in Edinburgh, you can imagine yourself what that would be like. It was very excellent. I was trying to think, and this is quite funny in this year particularly. I was doing computer science. I wasn't, really sold on being a software engineer or doing a lot of programming. So I thought I'll go do a master's. And one thing that really, really pulled me in was natural language processing. I read this book by Neil Stevenson called Snow Crash, and in the book there is this character called the librarian, and the librarian was basically an interactive kind of program that the main character could talk to and get knowledge from it. Would have a lot of knowledge, and it would distill it in a very easy way for the character to kind of interact with, basically ChatGPT. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is what I want to do. I want to make one of these. I want to make that computer off of Star Trek where you can talk to and you can do everything without touching a keyboard. I love this stuff. This is what I want to do. And I thought, you know what? Who could use this for bad? There would be no bad uses for this. It's not going to be a military use. It's not going to be anything. This would be like something that I can do that will be good for the world. It'd be really fun. And now we have ChatGPT and deep fakes and all sorts of stuff going wrong. So there we go. I was wrong on all the counts.
Brilliant. And so you enjoyed your time in Edinburgh and Glasgow, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. I did a little dip into Sheffield in between as well. Yeah. Scotland, I just absolutely love Scotland. It's such a wonderful place, and the people are just so much fun. And actually, I feel like I wanted to come back to Europe because where I lived I felt really remote, and I wanted to be able to walk places again, and just to go to a shop, but where we were living, it would be probably a 20-minute walk just to go to a supermarket, and we didn't really have that many coffee shops to just pop in and sit down. So I just wanted that kind of experience, but I got so much more out of living in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And the humor of Scottish people is very, very well aligned with the humor of Serbian people. So it just felt very much like home. It's good, yeah.
Well, you have something in common with Linda there, of course, because that's where Linda's from.
Yeah, I can hear that. That's why I'm hamming it up a little bit as well.
She's not funny, though. That's all I can say.
No, I'm not in the least bit funny.
She's really not funny at all. No, not at all.
And so what did you do when you left university? What were your next steps then, Tamara?
Yeah, I didn't really leave university until 2017. So
really, actually did.
I just kept going to different universities. So I met my husband and we moved to Ireland because he had to finish a grant he was on. He had one of those Marie Curie grants where he spent a year in Glasgow where we met, and then he had to go back to Galway. So we lived in Galway. I worked a little bit in the university there. And then after much applying, we're trying to find two jobs that were near each other. He ended up in Greenwich and I ended up at Cambridge University as a postdoc. So I had a nice, secure 5-year job there. And so I spent quite a lot of time here at Cambridge University. And when that was coming towards the end, I started looking at working in industry. And I worked in a little startup that made learning materials for kids, language learning materials called Mrs. Wordsmith. I worked at the Royal Society of Chemistry, and then I worked in a fintech startup called Sense Street, where we developed some natural language-based products for bankers, for trading bonds. Yeah, that was the first few years after that.
Why did you start up HerEthical AI? Tell us a story behind that.
Right. So about 2 years ago, I finished up at Sense Street, mainly because I couldn't do the commute. Cambridge is quite close, but it's not like, it's 2 hours still to City of London. And so I couldn't really do the commute every day. And so I decided to look for maybe something else to do. And a friend of mine here in Cambridge is a criminal psychologist, Miranda Horvath. She's also very well known in her field. She asked me if I could help out on a project because they needed somebody who had machine learning skills, AI skills, to work with a project where they were evaluating an algorithm a police force was making to do with stalking, predicting whether stalking offenders are going to escalate. And so they needed somebody with my skills. And I said, oh yeah, that would be interesting. This will be great. It'll be like working in that show, The Numbers. We look at police data. It'll be so exciting. And so I started on that, and it was pretty shocking. Police data it's shocking is the best word to describe it. But what we did as well as part of that project was to develop sort of guidelines for police to apply AI and machine learning ethically. And that we did learn from the police force a lot about how they use data and what are best practices, and we kind of help write some of those guidelines into a website anybody can access, and they can get a little bit of insight in what's the best ways to go forward. There is work on national guidelines for the same, but just at the moment there is a few non-practical guides for AI ethics in public sector, and this one is just a very practical guide for policing.
Tamara, did you have to, as a company, did you have to train the police force on how to use the piece of software, or is that something that was part of your job as well?
No. So this police force developed this algorithm themselves. We were just there to evaluate it. And we didn't actually have the company at that time. So we started the company last May, just as we finished that project. Two of the people I worked most closely on that project with were Hazel Sayer and Ruth Spence. And together we decided to keep working on similar projects. And then as we were presenting the final outcomes of our project, we met with Tony Joslin, who was retiring inspector from Devon and Cornwall Police. And he was in charge of their innovation portfolio as part of his last post there before retiring. And he had such great insights and ideas and energy about him. So we just all decided together, kind of spur of the moment, to start a company together to keep working in policing. So it was a bit of a not very thought through roller coaster that I put myself on.
The best kind, Tamara.
Yeah. Well, it'd be good if it had proper wheels on and stuff, but we're working on that. just flying and hoping for the best. Yeah. No, it's been really exciting. But the thing is, it's really actually a lot of police forces, they know now. Even a year ago, it was sort of a hard sell, but I think now they know they need to embrace machine learning, they need to embrace AI, they need to embrace the future that is already yesterday. And so we're trying to work with them, and there's a lot of presentations and explanations of what it can do for people and why it's good. And even yesterday we had a big long conference with police and other kind of stakeholders in the sector talking about what AI can do for policing.
I'm assuming law firms as well. I'm assuming that people who are prosecuting or defending would also be really interested in that topic.
Yeah, so actually CPS was one of the people who were talking, and they seem really on the ball with their approach to AI. As you would expect from lawyers, they have ethics frameworks written up, and they have a dedicated team, unlike a lot of the police forces, because when their funding was cut in 2010, a lot of police forces lost a lot of their non-frontline staff. So a lot of their innovation and tech got cut. And they're really trying to claw that back, but they don't really have the funding right now as well yet for that. But CPS seems to have quite a good dedicated team for AI. So it was really, really good to hear what they had to say. Law firms in general, there is quite a lot of law tech out there. So the first thing we built was victim blaming detection algorithm to look at how much victim blaming there is in family courts in particular, because we worked with two nonprofit organizations, Right to Equality and Riverlight, who've been doing this manually. So we're trying to help them out by making it automated and to kind of record the scale of the problem. But as part of that, I've joined up some law tech kind of groups. One of them is the Law Tech Scaler. It's really, really, really great program to help firms or little companies like ours that are trying to establish themselves in law tech field. And there's some really great projects out there to help law firms with AI, and a lot of projects to help people navigate law without the expense of contacting law firms, which I think is just a wonderful thing, because it can be very, very dear. So yeah.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the victim blaming solution will be good. It's in development. It works on court documents at the moment. We really want to get into a police force and look at police reports over time and by different crimes, because we want to see the extent of victim blaming there is in interactions with survivors. A lot of people, especially in gender-based violence, rape and serious sexual offenses, domestic violence, report quite a lot of bad interactions with police where sometimes they're not treated the way they feel they should be. And it'll be interesting to see if we can actually quantify that. Not for the purpose of making people look bad necessarily, but actually just helping make targeted training so that people can get better at interacting with survivors and to deliver better outcomes for onward prosecution.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm just a little unclear. How do you collect the information? How do you put this in one sort of area? How does that all happen?
Right. So if you have a collection of documents, you'd have to read through them manually, and you'd have to see, if there's any victim blaming in them manually. You would just read through them. So we do the same thing, just in an automated way, and we can highlight and extract instances of victim blaming. We have a taxonomy which divides these into sort of stereotyping, gaslighting, behavioral blame. There's a bunch of different labels we can assign to the different kinds of expressions that are used. And then we can, see how much of it occurs in each individual document or across a collection. And if you have ways of dividing that collection, for example, by time or by topic, if you could divide your collection by different crimes, then you could see how much victim blaming there is per different crime, for example. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
It sounds like you really love your job, Tamara. Love what you're doing.
Yeah, we started off with me wanting to be a painter or something. And it's taken me a really long time to warm up to what I'm doing, I think, because I was doing it and I was good enough, right, to work at a lot of really cool places. If somebody gave me a project, I would get really excited about it eventually, but I never had the drive to start my own projects, if you know what I mean. I was happy to do what people told me. But since I started working with police data and seeing just the gaps that people fall into, where data is not passed between different agencies or it's not looked at because they're completely overwhelmed by the amount of data they have. So many different crimes, so many notes for each crime, evidence. Like if you think about how much data you have on your phone, and every person who hands them their phone, they have to download that somewhere and store it and then look through it. At the moment, they're reading all the text messages manually for evidence.
Wow.
So basically there's probably about 20,000 phones. They've not been looked at, at least. So things don't get processed unless they're certain they're going to find some sort of data on it.
Yeah.
That leads to successful prosecution, which means there's this loop of not being able to go through enough information. There's just so much to be done. So I can think of so many things to do. I'm just waiting to get my hands on all the data so I can solve all the problems, which probably makes me sound so manic when I talk to people that they run away.
Do you find, see, my son is a computer scientist as well, and I hear he talks to me, and sometimes it goes right over my head because I don't particularly understand, how he's got to where he's got. But is it a never-ending journey for you? Do you have to sort of make sure that you compartmentalize things? Because, as you say, there are so many things that you would like to do, which is fantastic.
Definitely, yeah. You have to choose the right projects that people are going to be interested in, that are going to benefit somebody, and to choose projects that can be delivered so that they can actually be installed somewhere and be put into action. So it's about choosing the right thing. I'm not sure that victim blaming will be that project that takes off and takes over all the police forces and everybody's using it to see how well they're doing. It might be a bit of a hard sell, but I think it's an example of a way of using artificial intelligence, or the current state of artificial intelligence, which is super powerful, for something that can drive culture to the better. We can use it to detect bias instead of falling for its bias, and we can change culture instead of letting it dictate culture for us.
Yeah, I like that. Changing culture. I like that.
And I understand you're involved with Comberton Crusaders Football Club. Just to completely change the subject. Is that...
Where did you find that out?
I'm my own AI, actually. I do my research. So did that come back from a love of football, or is it kids or something? Or?
Yeah, no, I actually genuinely love football. So it was one of the easier ways to integrate when you move countries. So when I moved to Canada, I started playing quite a lot of football with like lunchtime kind of thing initially, and then clubs, because in Canada it's very much a women's sport. There's so many more other sports. They're like men's sports, like, you know, hockey, ice hockey. But yeah, we get a lot of soccer. And so I've been playing it on and off as much as I could since I was a kid. And yet my kids have joined Comberton Crusaders, which is a children's club. So I'm helping out by volunteering to run their soccer center, which is for reception to year 2 kids. And I coach a little bit there too, although we have a really excellent coach that's sort of a bit of a legend around these parts, because he seems to have coached everybody. His name is Alex Bidet, and just to give a shout out. But I also play with the women's team in Cambridge, Cambridge Women's Rangers, also named after the Scottish club. It was not a conscious choice. I just joined up and I was like, oh, why are you guys called Rangers? And they're like, oh, then we had a Scottish woman early on who named us that. So it's a great club.
Oh.
And have you still got time for the art? We've got to find out if you're still painting and drawing.
Not as such. So I do a bit with the kids, but I think starting a company and trying to be present for them, it's a bit of a full-time thing. I did paint a bit when I was doing my PhD. That was probably my most consistent sort of displacement activity. But yeah, other than that, it's kind of tapered off since then. I did do a bit of photography, which was also enjoyable and less messy and easier to set up. So that was good fun. Yeah.
Tamara, if you were able to talk to your younger self and a younger generation, what would you say about the job that you do and the roles that you do at the moment? Is it something that you feel is really, really important and a lot more women should get involved in?
Yeah, I think it's funny, computer science, when I was in my undergraduate, it was about 5 to 10% women. And there is really no good reason for this. A lot of women go into math. It's basically similar to math, apart from some weird cultural thing where just women were not making it through to that level in computing. I think that then when I was doing natural language processing, that was a lot more gender balanced. It was really interesting. There was about 50% women, because a lot of people were coming from psychology and linguistics. So they would do a psychology or linguistics degree, and then they would refocus into computational linguistics or natural language processing. However, the neural networks crowd, robotics crowd, and really, really hardcore machine learning was much, much more male. So when neural networks started taking over the language space, which is why we have GPT and all of those large language models that are neural network based, it became again skewed towards men. So a lot of these kind of projects that women were bringing into the space, which were more contemplative and looking into qualitative aspects of language and how it's used and how it's contextual, a lot of that got sidetracked for about 10 years. And I think now is a good time for it to come back that way, because a lot of people can get into doing quite complex machine learning tasks a lot easier because they can leverage the power of ChatGPT or Claude or these, large language models. So I think it's an interesting time for disciplines to merge. And I think actually a lot of people can get into this space from humanities and sciences like psychology, because making the applications in the AI field now is a lot like talking to somebody. So I think I'm really hopeful that more women will rejoin from different disciplines back into computing again.
And one final question. Why HerEthical? Where did the name come from? HerEthical AI.
All right. I was under pressure to come up with a name for the company, and the alternative suggestions were non-PC. So I was walking my dog and I was walking around the field and I was like, I can't let them win one of those names. So I thought, well, it would be cool. And it actually came, I was like, oh, like I quite like the idea of being heretical, like as opposed to HerEthical, like being heretical and kind of going against the grain and, you know, not going with the flow and trying different things, you know, from what all the dudes are trying, basically. And then somehow I was like, but we also want to be ethical. So what if I just change that to HerEthical? And then somebody was like, oh, HerEthical. I was like, oh, yeah. Okay, so it kind of works in 3 different levels. But yeah, it didn't even start from the gendered aspect of the word, the way it's turned out. It started with being slightly different and trying to try something new. Yeah.
Oh,
that's great.
That's a good story, actually. It's rather good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Tamara, for joining us on Women Making Waves. That's been a really interesting talk through what you do, which is quite hard for most of us to understand, but what really interesting stuff, and a bit about your life as well. That's been brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
You're listening to Women Making Waves radio show and podcast, brought to you by Susie Thorpe and Linda Ness. This show is all about women doing extraordinary things.
A warm welcome to Julie Walters, a seasoned health coach with a rich background in science and health, who crafted her unique approach after graduating from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition in New York. Now, with a history that includes studying molecular genetics at King's College London and launching businesses to connect scientific discoveries with practical applications, Jules now dedicates her expertise to empowering busy women in their health journeys. Jules, welcome to Women Making Waves.
Thank you, Susie and Linda. It's great to be here.
Oh, it really is lovely to have you here. Now, you said when you were younger, you didn't really think about your health that much. How early do you think we need to think about our health as an adult?
That's a great question. I think it depends. You know, our bodies are really high functioning, high performing things, and our bodies give us signals. You know, they tell us when we're not happy, and sometimes we listen to those signals and sometimes we ignore them. And so I think it really depends what your body's trying to tell you. And so in my case, I was lucky enough that, you know, I always ate well. I always exercised. It was only last year when I had my DNA sequenced for my metabolic genes, because, you know, I love DNA and I love data, that I realized that my body wasn't quite happy with gluten. So I'd been eating gluten for 60 years. Who knew that my body didn't like it? And so that's when I really started to dial in to, you know, as we age, because I'm 61 now, you know, how do I make sure that I get to a really vibrant 100 and beyond, which is absolutely doable? That's when I really started, you know, over the last 5 years, I really started to dial in and tweak and make more adjustments. So I think the long answer is, Susie, it depends what your body's telling you. But you will know. You will know when you're tired, when you're fatigued, when you're carrying 10 extra pounds, when you just don't have the energy that you used to. Well, your body's trying to tell you something.
Do you think younger generations should be really looking at their health?
I think we should all be looking at our health. I think you have less time in your 20s and 30s. Just because you're trying to get on the career ladder, you're trying to figure out who you might partner with for life. You know, there's a lot of other things going on that take precedence, and your body can be more forgiving because you naturally have more energy. I think as we age, and my expertise, my special sweet spot is women over 50, and that's because we've gone through the menopause. For better or worse, we've gone through the hormonal storm and we're out the other side. And the opportunity is now that we're in a calmer space and we're noticing things that we're not as energetic as we were. And we have perhaps a little bit more time. If you've had children, you know, they may have left home. So that's where I think the real opportunity is for women. And also, I think women of our age have a generational respect for doctors. You know, I think about my mother, she almost genuflects every time she goes in to see the clinician. And doctors are as variable as, you know, having a plumber come to your house. You know, some are great, some are not so great. Some keep up with the latest research, some not so much. So I think the opportunity is to really understand how our bodies work and to become, as I say, the CEO of your health. Don't outsource that role to your clinician. Your doctor's busy helping people who are sick. Hopefully you're not sick. If you are sick temporarily, then fabulous, see a doctor. But if you're not, if you're well, but you're just feeling not yourself or not as energetic, then there are ways that you can dial in and listen and become the CEO of your health. So that's really the sweet spot.
I think that's a great phrase, actually, become the CEO of your health. It's a fantastic phrase. I'm interested, Jules, in hearing a little bit about your history, because you've had a really interesting and varied career. You're Australian, as we can probably tell from your accent, but you started in newspapers and moved into television. Tell us a brief summary of all the things that you did when you were, and how you got to make that huge change in your career as well.
Yeah, well, it does sound like a long and winding road. So I started in Perth in Western Australia in newspapers. My father was one of the first faces on a news anchor on Australian television. So there was a kind of a family history in newspapers and the media. So I started, in Perth. And I think the two threads to my life are, I love being with everyday people. I love talking to normal people and figuring out why they do what they do. So, the media is very good at that. And then, so I started in Perth, and I was always told that the one daily newspaper in Perth, which is still going, and some of my colleagues are still there that I trained with, was not the greatest newspaper on earth. And I was like, really? Wow, I thought it was amazing. And so then I went to the UK, to Fleet Street, as it was in its dying days, and worked in local newspapers and then national newspapers and then local television and national television. And so Good Morning Britain, which is still going on ITV. So I produced that. So 3-hour live show. The everyday theme again was a bored housewife in Wigan was our key audience, and she just wanted some inspiration, ideally in 3 minutes while she was getting the kids to school. So it was kind of on in the background. So figuring out how to make content that was relevant and interesting for her was the challenge. And so I could write 8 sentences on anything, because a television report is about 8 to 9 sentences, but really rarely 10. And so that's when I thought, I really want to know one subject in depth, and that's when I started my scientific journey.
And why that area? Because it's from being in the media to going into science. It's a bit of a leap, really.
Yes, it is. It is. That is true. But what I love about science is that it absolutely makes sense. Like, there's no opinion in science. You can talk about the data, but it's rational, it's logical, it's based on facts, it's based on experiments that we can do and test and retest. So, if I'm now talking about muscles and how our muscles change as we age, I can go into the data and say, oh, okay, so most of us are losing 3 to 5% of our muscle per year post 30. Like, that's not an opinion, that's fact. That's data. You can do something with that. So that's what I love about science. And also, people are just really honest in science.
Do you find it's nice to have both experience in humanity and science?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Susie. Because what often happens, is that you can get into science and get stuck in the lab, because some people love the lab. Some people love doing experiments again and again and again. And you're in Cambridge, so you know this. A huge scientific powerhouse. But I didn't really like the lab. I got to the lab and it was just test tubes and pipettes, and we were experimenting on Xenopus laevis, which is when I did my degree at King's College London, which is a very big toad. I didn't really like it. I didn't like the lab. There are only 3 people. I thought, I could spend years here. I could spend years. Me and a couple of other people in the lab and the toads. And honestly, most science doesn't work because it's complicated and the bodies are complicated, and we use toads because they're a model for humans. I wanted to get out of the lab. I wanted to take all that insight in the lab and leave the lab, but understand the process and how, you're going to have to spend 5 years to run these experiments, and they'll probably all fail, and then you'll probably have to change the buffer or the solution or the gene or the whatever and get it right. So I love when somebody else has done all that hard work and then I can apply it going back to everyday people, because I think we are of the generation of the genome. It was only in 1953 that Watson and Crick cracked the code, and then we spent 20 years thinking, okay, now we're in the age of genetics. Now we will know what this means to us. And in my experience, it's only really now, 50 odd years later or longer, that we actually can now use that information. Like, Susie, you could go in and have your DNA sequenced. A friend of mine in science carries his DNA around on a thumb drive.
And where does a health coach fit in? We've got fitness coaches, we've got doctors if we're sick. What is a health coach, Jules?
Yeah, great question. Well, I had to look up because I'm now based in the United States. So I moved here about 4 years ago because there's so much innovation in the US. There is a huge innovation in the UK, but within the NHS, as you probably realize, it takes longer. So a health coach, the closest analogy is a bit like a fitness coach in the gym. So a health coach helps you to make lifestyle changes, where a fitness coach in the gym might help you to lift weights safely, as one example. A health coach works, our lane is lifestyle. So that's nutrition, movement, so exercise, sleep, and stress. And we know that at least 80% of primary care doctor visits are stress related. So what we do is we help people make those lifestyle changes that they might have been thinking about, but find it hard to do for whatever reason. We're all rational beings. We all have reasons for why we do what we do. So in the United States, there are 128,000 health coaches. In the
Wow.
28,000. In the UK, I looked it up, there's 1,000 in the NHS, which is not bad. It's a start. But so what we do, if you are working with a clinician, so say your clinician says you're pre-diabetic. So as an astounding fact, in the United States, where we have terrible food that is mass produced, so of 330 million people, 100 million are pre-diabetic and don't know it.
Goodness me.
Oh, it's extraordinary. So, their blood sugar is too high. So there are, the biggest thing you can do with that is change your lifestyle. So move more, eat less sugar, up your protein, and work on one of those things at a time. So there's a huge need for health coaches to bridge to write the clinician might write out a prescription, so first line diabetes, metformin, but will often wait till your blood sugar is at a 6.5, which is, the technical definition of diabetes. But there's a lot you can do further upstream. So let's not wait till you have a diagnosis of diabetes. Let's get moving and changing earlier than that. Mm-hmm. So that's where the health coach comes in, because and it's a conversation, Linda. It's so tell me, what's going on? Yeah. And then help them one tiny step at a time, not everything together, because I think as humans, we can be black and white and think, okay, I'm going to change everything. And that rarely works. It's
you're right.
What's the one little thing?
Yeah, that's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you're bored, and it's too difficult and it's too hard, and then you just slip back into old ways. I think this book that you have out, Nano Health Habits, is a great way of making people change, isn't it? Of having changes imposed on you, just a little step at a time. It's got to be much easier.
Yes. That's right, Linda. And they've got to want to do it. So health coaches use a modality called intrinsic motivation. So if I want you to change, or your doctor wants you to change, that's not going to work unless you want to change. So what's in it for you? So part of the methodology as a health coach is you tap into what's in it for you. And everybody has a reason for what's in it for them, whether it's they want to they want to get their husband off their backs or their family off their backs if they're still smoking. They want to live to see their grandchildren go to university. Like there's something. They all have. So let's talk about that. So the more that you can tap into what's in it for you rather than what's in it for everybody else, it is helpful. And also, some people are just not ready. And you can hear it in the way they speak. There are certain cues that they say, and it's not the right time. And that's totally fine.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask what kind of people come to you for help. Have they been sent to you by their doctors, or do they just find you and kind of think, oh yeah, I really need a bit of a nudge here? Is that the kind of people that come to you?
Yes. So a great question, Linda. So what I do is I run programs. So I'm launching a new program for women over 50. The thing that gets women over 50 to try something different, like what's in it for them, is during menopause, we tend to stack on about 12 to 15 pounds of extra weight. Not our fault. It's nothing that we've done wrong. It's just our hormones and our body changes and the loss of estrogen. And so that's the thing that gets them to change because they're just sick of it. They're sick of carrying this extra weight. They've tried the diets that didn't work, or they worked for a little while and then they didn't. That's the impetus for change. And then during the program, not only do we look at weight and managing weight and energy and how to optimize energy levels, but we also, and this is only available in the United States at the moment, it is expanding to the UK and to Australia. There's a great company called 3x4 Genetics that I love. And so we send their DNA off to the lab at 3x4 and we analyze about 150 genes that are involved in their metabolism. Not only is it not their fault that during menopause they put on weight, it may also be that it's encoded in their DNA that they find certain, their body, like my body holds on to fat, like it's, my body's constantly preparing for a famine that never arrives. So if it can just hold on to fat, it will. So I have to be, that's wired in my DNA. There's nothing I can do about that. It's just in about every cell in my body that we're going to hold on to fat because that's part of my body's thinking that how to look after me. So I have to be very careful. Like just as a small example, I don't normally eat bacon because it's full of saturated fat. But this week, I'm very careful about what kind of bacon we buy. So I bought a thing of bacon. Oh my goodness, 2 pounds. There it goes, holding on, saturated fat. Just stick that in around my tummy. We layer in the genetics so that the women can work with their bodies rather than against their bodies. It's just a delight. It's just an absolute delight to see. So one of my clients at the moment, we changed one thing, just one thing. She was so fed up about this extra weight and her clinician was saying, okay, I think we better, think about one of these new, weight loss drugs. We changed one thing, which was to focus on eating more protein. And every week she's lost a pound.
I want to ask you, as a woman, what is it like being an entrepreneur in the US and having your own businesses?
I think what I love about America, and I think America has a lot in common with Australia, we're pioneers, we're optimistic pioneers. So the Americans are very, very optimistic despite all the evidence sometimes. Whereas the Brits are more cautious. So, as an example, in one of my previous businesses, our revenue was often coming from the United States because we were working with the pharmaceutical industry, and this is the epicenter of pharma. And, we were going to a meeting with a potential client, and the head of sales would be American, would email me or text me and say, Jules, today is going to be awesome. And I would think, what? I don't know if it is because we haven't got there yet.
Yeah, she wouldn't get that.
No, you wouldn't, no.
No. Yeah, today is going to be awesome. And there is that naive optimism. And I took a British doctor to an American conference in the last year. And he said to me, Jules, they're also optimistic and helpful.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, well, over a certain, level of education. So they're all PhDs or clinicians. They're all like that. I said, welcome to America. And then the same in Australia, like in the old days, we took Good Morning Britain to Australia. So we could say, good morning, Britain, and welcome to Sydney Harbour. And we put the show on a boat in the middle of Sydney Harbour. And we put Eamon Holmes, if you remember Eamon, was the anchor. And we put him on a boat in Sydney Harbour. And we did like 3 hours of live programming from the boat. And we had like a backup, team in London. So if the lit line went down, we were fine. And at the end of this 2 weeks of live, Eamon said to the Australian camera crew, technical crew, that was amazing. How many times have you done that before? And the Australian crew said, oh, first time, mate. Yeah. So that's what I like. And the thing that I miss, I think, the other side is what I miss is the critical thinking. The Brits are amazing at critical thinking. So I think if you can combine those things together, you've got, and so my husband, who's very British, so we'll get up in the morning and I'll say, are you pumped? Which is very American. Are you pumped? You say, I'm awesomely pumped.
So these different nuances that you have to sort of take with you or forget. So if you come back and you plant yourself back in the UK for a conference, those little nuances have to change, don't they? So you have to adapt wherever you are to make sure that you either don't upset somebody or they don't get your joke. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes, that's right. But, the great thing about the Brits in America is the Americans love, as a gross generalization, a British accent. They love it. It's almost like you open your mouth and they go, oh, thank goodness. Somebody who's clever.
Oh, that's really
clever and risk averse.
Yeah, so it's great. I mean, I think, America is going to be an interesting ride over the next 4 years. I think there are opportunities in health, because for America, the opportunity is in the chaos. So as an example, when I first came here and I was, I had my annual mammogram, and the clinician wrote a script and said, right, off you go, here you go. And I said, well, where do I go with this? Like a prescription for a mammogram. He said, wherever you like.
The healthcare confuses me greatly about America. In a nutshell, is it still as difficult to get healthcare like you can in the NHS? And I'm not saying that the NHS is easy to get access to healthcare, but is it better in the UK than it is in America?
I would say it's different. I would say the UK is very much a one approach. Yeah, and your primary care is the gatekeeper of everything. Mm-hmm. In the United States, how I work with my primary care is I send him my data, so I keep him up to date. I will order my own tests. I will order my own lipid panel. I will order my own blood glucose, and I will keep him in the loop, but I own my data. I'm in control of my data, and I know and so I think that's the opportunity in the US. If you're well informed and if you're well educated, and if you are the CEO of your health, that's what you do. That's harder to do in the UK because your clinician might say, I don't think you need to have a bone scan every year. And I would say, I absolutely do think I need a bone scan every year, because if I am developing osteopenia or osteoporosis, I want to be ahead of the curve, not behind. So I will go ahead and order that. Thank you very much. So that's the cultural difference.
So your new book, Nano Health Habits, great idea. And I've been looking at some of your tips in your newsletter as well, and really great tips. Like when you get up in the morning, put on your walking shoes so you haven't got any excuse not to get out there, which is great because that's the kind of thing that's tripped me up in the past, actually. But I also noticed something else next to the reduced processed foods. You've also put practice kindness, and I thought that was really nice. It's not directly a nano health habit, but it kind of is, isn't it? Because if you're kind to people, it does impact you. It is a good thing.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And, going back to most doctors' visits are stress-related. So being kind and receiving kindness just reduces our stress, all of us. So, I'm really excited about the world ahead for women, I think, to be able to step into being more active. So, you can find me just at juleswalters.com is probably the best way to follow me, or you can find the book Nano Health Habits on Amazon. So my mission is to help 1 million women over 50 become the CEO of their health.
Thank you so much, Jules Walters, for being on Women Making Waves. It's been brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
You're welcome. Great to speak to you both.
That's all we have time for today on Women Making Waves. Our thanks go to our guests, Tamara Polajnar and Jules Walters. We're always on the lookout to feature women living extraordinary lives, so please do contact us if you know of someone we should be talking to.
You can contact us via social media on X and Facebook at WomenMW, or on Instagram at Women Making Waves. You can also find us on cambridge.radio or visit our website womenmakingwaves.co.uk, where you can hear all of our interviews.